Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train episode 202, number 202. And here we are on the Iron Horseman route, doing some more work in preparation for future episodes, and also building more tiles for the first time in a while. Of course, the reason we're doing this is in preparation for the construction of the Honor Peak Cog Railway, which is something that's been part of the map sort of in my head for a while, but obviously we don't really have much to do with it. There isn't any decent rack track out there. Well, there's one thing of rack track, and there aren't really any cog engines, so we're up the creek with this, but I'll leave it as is. I'm going to be building the terrain at a later date and putting in a placeholder rail. And aside from that, there's really nothing we can do. But anyways, today, I actually do a lot of work with terrain and stuff like that. Sort of continuing off of last episode, this is, I hypothesized basically what's going on up here, and that's sort of the end of it for everything in the cog railway for now. I'll come back to it in the future. But today we have a topic suggested by Captain Tank, quote, Captain Tank Traincraft, in, that's a mouthful of a name, it's changed since then, in the Portal 2 Co-op Episode 6. Now it was different to receive a question on one of these episodes instead of another one. But I'm going to answer it just the same, and there are two questions in the thing. So two things. One, in the zombie train, did you ever have to stop for lubricant of 3254? Not just that, but changing 3254's tires or shelling on one of your wheels. Now, the thing with... okay. First things first. When we got the engine, it wasn't exactly reaching the end of its life, but it was edging towards a 1472. Not that that presented any massive problems, but it did mean the engine hadn't been inspected in a little while, and was in need of some maintenance. This, of course, is maintenance we were not able to provide. We weren't in the position to do that kind of work, and we never really fell into that position until the Zombie Train Incorporated started, and we had all those resources that we otherwise never had. So, without a major rebuild shop or significant stores of parts or the ability to manufacture a lot of new parts, we were kind of up the creek when it came to major repairs, and the only thing I can say is that we got extremely lucky over the course of, well, at least the beginning of the zombie train. When things started to break down, help came in the form of radio transmission from the West Coast, which the West Coast was obviously safer, as I've talked about. It's sort of underneath the military's umbrella, started out westward and moved eastward slowly over time. And that was really nice, and that's why we had to journey all the way to the West Coast. That's why we went to Portland in the first place. Now, once we got there, pretty much the entire engine was disassembled, and anything that had a problem was rebuilt. That includes tires, that includes flues, and, parts of the firebox that needed patching, and the automatic stoker was broken. That's something that always sticks with me. What else? What else was a problem? We'd busted a lot of the glass in the engine before. And the lights and the marker lights. I think we had lost a marker light at some point. But as for the lubricant, that was the kind of stuff that we had to pick up on the fly, Most of the major maintenance was done in Portland that first time we were there. I was not present for it. Actually, it was done in a makeshift facility at Tillamook. It started in Portland, and then we had to evacuate the city. But that's a story for another time, and I believe I've talked about the Battle for Portland before. So, it's not something I'm going to touch on again, or at least not right now. So, while they were leaving the city, we were with 4449 running down to Portland, or running down, not to Portland, we were running down to San Francisco to get in direct contact with the military, with, everything that was left. I keep finding myself torn as to what to call them. But, anyways. So, I wasn't there for the rebuild. I don't really know everything that was broken. So, in fact, it was left mostly to Oswald and Carolyn. They were kind of in charge, and they knew plenty about steam engines. So, they were able to handle it. And they did a pretty decent job, because we never had... Oh, it's right, I forgot about the cylinder head. Well, we had a lot of random problems. We lost a coupler once, it was ripped off the front of the engine. We had a cylinder head basically explode and launch itself into the back of the car that was in front of the engine, which happened to be the caboose of Beta Rail. And I'm trying to think of other issues we've had. We had plenty of derailments, which did a number on the wheels and the tires, although we were not able to replace them. We did not have the facilities to do that until we got to Portland. So, we were wearing a little thin there. Anyways. Also, the boiler jacket got beat the hell up, because we got shot at plenty. So, lubricant, right? Lubricant's the other part of the question. Lubricant was a problem. And, not necessarily the biggest of problems. But whenever we wanted to move, obviously there are a lot of things that need to be lubricated. And if you're running out of lubricant, you're running the risk of, well, a lot of failures. Hot boxes, things binding, just plenty of trouble you don't want to get into. So having enough lubricant was something that we sort of put a lot of emphasis on. This was why we raided places that other people typically didn't raid, and that would be garages, repair shops for cars, automotive dealerships. When people were taking whatever they had and running northward and leaving behind everything else, these storerooms and these showrooms and places like that, while they would get damaged sometimes or looted sometimes, people didn't take the grease. People didn't take the oil. What use do you have for that? And, it came down to some points where we had to improvise. We would do with what we could, but sometimes it was not the best, in the way of grease, in the way of lubricant. And I would apply most of it. I was not in charge of keeping our stores, however. And I do know that sometimes it was subbed out. Thankfully, nothing we ever had to swap out was necessarily, well, it certainly wasn't better. I'm not going to say it wasn't worse than grease. It was not better, but sometimes it'd be a little bit more flammable, and that led to some problems, some interesting problems sometimes. And on top of that, it sort of burned through our supplies of other things now, but keeping the engine greased up was something that we had to do. That was the kind of thing where if we were running low on that, it was pull over and stop and figure out where we can get more and then go there immediately. And it's not like something lubricating is particularly hard to come by, but once you start running out of it, it's not the easiest case to make a hell of a lot more. Or, any significant quantity more that isn't a little bit sketchy. So, that was what the scouting parties looked for a lot, and again, thankfully, most people that were left had no use for it. We had a couple of instances of draining oil out of stopped cars just to get oil. When you're running by a highway and, there's all these bottlenecks of cars that have long since stopped, which most of them, unfortunately, will have zombies in them, or dead bodies. But typically zombies, which will reach out at you, and that can be troublesome. And it's particularly dangerous to go walking down a highway like that for that reason. But that was one of the places we went for oil to keep the engine running. And it was, after we realized it could be a useful place, it was a fairly well-used place. Just any clogged freeway or highway. And naturally those cars would never run again anyways, but we would go back to those sort of highways and pull all the cars for scrap metal when we needed it. Anyways, I'm trying to recount other things that broke on the engine. We ran headlong into things once or twice. The headlight towards the end was pretty much destroyed and then rebuilt from scratch. So we kind of had a ghetto headlight. The smoke box door fell off once because the hinges were broken after we crashed into something. Something fairly solid, if I recall correctly. We set the whole tender on fire at one point. That was on the pass. We nearly sheared off part of the top of the tender, like the coal bucket area, because we backed into a low clearance area, just a little bit too far. Like, really low clearance area. Not the kind of thing where you'd send steam engines or normal-sized coaches or cars or anything. It was due to a part of a bridge that had started to collapse and was limiting, and I thought we could sneak into there, or at least get far enough in, because there was a car on the other side of it. There were some flats there. Actually, they were well cars. But I wanted to back up to couple to them, and then, hook the air hoses up, and they were a couple feet farther than I thought they were. And so I backed basically into this bridge and smashed the top of the tender, which ended up with us reconfiguring the coal bucket a little bit, which was beneficial in the long run, but that was a mess when we did it. As for the engine itself, we really kept good tabs on the state of the bearings. Or at the very least, we were very lucky with the state of the bearings. It was always, if they seem even the least bit dry, always check on them. And it's not like they went very long without being checked on. I would always try to stop and look over everything when we'd stopped. Or, just myself go out and look over everything. What else? There were some mishaps in the cab, actually. Other than breaking the glass a couple of times. We had the doors. The doors on the walls of the cab got shot to pieces repeatedly. They got sort of battered and beaten on as well. Actually, during a particular... what's the word I'm looking for? During a particular altercation in the cab, we knocked the steam gauge just clean off. Just, hit it, shattered it, bent it backwards. This wasn't me. Somebody hit it with a crowbar. And it wasn't on purpose. They were swinging at somebody else who was trying to steal it. Well, I don't remember if it was one of us or one of them that did it. I was on the ground. And I came back and the cab's full of steam, and so we shuttered that. And we didn't really go anywhere or do anything until we'd fix that, because you don't want to not know how much pressure you have. The pop-off will generally regulate that. The whistle got something jammed in it for a period. That was after we'd gone through something else. What else? I don't know. We had a lot of things happen to that engine. It went through hell and back, but I admire the tenacity of our engine, and I'm so glad that we eventually made it out to Portland for that rebuild. And of course, stuff happened during the Zombie Train Incorporated as well.